Hello and welcome to another webinar in our leadership series. My name is Dr. Donald Chick and I am President and CEO of New Synergist Consulting. We provide a variety of products and services including leadership development, strategy planning support, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as coaching. We also utilize a variety of assessments and data analytics to support our products and services, as well as providing these services as a standalone product. Meetings of all types are an important aspect of running any type of business or organization. When should I have a meeting? How do I plan for it? How do I actually run the meeting? What happens after the meeting is over? All of these aspects of meetings are important, and in this webinar, we will provide you with tools, tips, and techniques that will help you run all types of meetings, short ones or long ones, status meetings, training sessions, whatever your organization needs to run effectively and efficiently. We'll provide these tools in a way that will provide you with the confidence needed to run successful meetings. Our webinar objectives today include planning and preparing for meetings, identifying participants who should be at the meeting, choosing the time and place, creating an agenda, setting up the meeting space, incorporating electronic options, understanding and identifying the meeting roles and responsibilities, how to use the agenda you've created, how to chair a meeting, how to deal with disruptions, how to professionally deal with personality conflicts, how to take minutes, and finally, how to make the most of your meeting using games, activities, and prizes. The first step in any meeting process is planning and preparation. In this part of our webinar, we will talk about some of the planning and preparation steps needed to make sure your meeting is effective, efficient, and successful. Determining who attends the meeting is an important first step in preparation. A tendency to include all employees in an effort to cover all angles could alter the meeting dynamics. Before you decide who to invite, be specific about the purpose of the meeting. For example, if you are meeting to resolve a problem, invite only those who are capable of providing solutions to that problem. Avoid inviting a high-ranking manager who could thwart solutions before they are even developed. On the other hand, if the purpose of the meeting is to make a decision on a policy or product, do not invite people who do not have the power to enact these changes. Including people who cannot contribute to the meeting will leave them feeling excluded, which may affect the meeting environment. Identifying the purpose of your meeting first will help you determine who should attend. The following are some common reasons to call a meeting: problem solving, making a decision, resolving conflict, initiating a project, a planning meeting, or even brainstorming. Once you determine your meeting purpose, list the participants you want to attend and then determine what each participant will contribute to the meeting. If a participant is deemed a non-contributor, they should be removed from the list. When all non-contributors are removed, you will be left with a list of the people that should be included in your meeting. There are several considerations when planning the time and place of your meeting. For instance, the time of day is essential if your meeting is meant to be a brainstorming session or a problem-solving meeting. Setting these types of meetings right after lunch or late in the day could be a frustrating experience. After lunch, people tend to be lethargic, and meetings at the end of the day are plagued with participants looking at the clock in anticipation of leaving work early and going home. Meetings that require energy and a high level of participation are best scheduled between 8 and 9 in the morning. Most workers are not engaged in their daily work yet, so you will have their attention and energy at the meeting. The next best time is around 3 p.m. This gives your participants enough time to recuperate from their lunchtime meal and offers at least an hour of cushion before they start thinking about going home. Meetings that are low key could be scheduled anytime during the day. Just remember not to schedule them too close to lunch or near the end of the workday. Location is also important. Try to schedule your meetings in a well-lit, spacious room if possible. You could also make sure, of course, if possible, to get a room with windows. Dark and cramped rooms will bog down your meeting, as some people may feel claustrophobic and distracted by their surroundings. Other considerations are the need for privacy if the meeting topic is of a sensitive nature. Having a room with more privacy will make participants more comfortable. And if you plan to have an outside visitor attend your meeting, situate your meeting near the main entrance. This way your visitor does not have to search for your meeting. Creating the agenda can actually be easy if you know what to do in advance. The SOAP technique helps to collect the topics, organize them, and determine which will contribute the most to your meeting. First, seek topics from your participants. Send an email to the list of participants you created asking for agenda topics. Give a brief explanation of the purpose of the meeting and an idea of what you are looking for in terms of topics. Don't make this a formal invitation. When you send the request, ask the participants to indicate what time will work best for them and how much time they anticipate they will need to discuss their topic. Provide a deadline for when you will need this information so you can begin to plan the agenda. Next, organize the topics into a list. Once you've received the topics, organize them into a list along with the time and the name of the presenter. This will give you the ability to scan through the list, narrowing it down to the topics you will select for the agenda. Next, assess which topics are relevant to the meeting purpose. With your list organized, determine which topics are the most relevant to the purpose of the meeting. Scratch out those topics you don't intend to use. Finally, pick the number of relevant topics that will fit into your meeting time. Review the time of the remaining topics. Select enough of them to fill the time of your meeting, minus about 10 minutes. Give yourself 10 minutes for meeting overrun, and if you go over, you'll still end on time. If you do not, then you get to adjourn your meeting early, making everyone happy. Remember, contact the presenter that had their topic removed from the agenda. Explain the reason why it was not put on the agenda, and recommend that topic be saved for another meeting. Each meeting you hold will typically require both basic and special materials. Your job as the meeting manager is to determine what materials you will need and acquire them in advance, avoiding any last-minute surprises. The SHOW's acronym stands for Stationery, Handouts, organizer, writing tools, and special requests. Let's break down each letter so you get a better understanding of what this means. Stationery. This is all the paper you will need at the meeting, including notepads, sticky notes, index cards, envelopes, tape, paper clips, folders, and possibly a flip chart. Each meeting is different. You do not have to bring everything on this list. Determine what is going to take place at the meeting and the materials needed for each activity or presentation. It is also wise to consult with the people on your agenda to see if they're going to facilitate activities that might require stationery, for instance. Handouts. Many times you or your presenters will need to distribute handouts. There could be a worksheet or an outline for an electronic presentation. In any case, you should consult with your presenters and acquire any handouts they plan to use. Determine if the handout they are giving will be the most up-to-date version. If not, have them send it to you when they finalize it. Remember, set the expectation to have it a day or so in advance, giving you time to print and file it in your handout organizer. The next step in our acronym is the organizer. When it is time to meet, the last thing you want to do is show up with a stack of handouts. Using an organizer like a portable accordion file or Pendaflex is an easy way to file your handouts and other stationery materials in one container. This system will allow you to file the documents in an orderly fashion, making distribution of the materials more professional. You definitely want to avoid shuffling handouts around in front of your participants when it comes time to distribute them. Writing tools. This includes pens, markers, highlighters, and dry erase markers you may need for your meeting. And finally, special requests. From time to time, your presenters may make a special request. An example, for instance, could be a poster. Ask your presenters ahead of time for any special requests. Many times invitations are sent without much thought. We send them via electronic mail and assume that is enough. However, there is more thought that should go into it. The 3P approach gives a consistent and clear method of structuring your meeting invitation. Here's the breakdown. First, the purpose. The purpose of your meeting must be stated up front. It's not enough to put in the subject line, planning session. The vagueness of your purpose could result in low attendance. Be specific with your purpose. Instead of planning session, you could state, planning our budget for the first quarter. In addition, you should attach your agenda, which gives more detail of the discussion topics. Second, place and time. Determine ahead of time where and when the meeting will take place. Avoid sending out invitations with a to be determined message. The more effort you put into details in advance, the more likely it is that your attendees will take you seriously. In addition, provide clear instructions on the exact location. Finally, PACT. Create a sense of binding agreement by setting expectations so you get the most responses as soon as possible with a level of commitment. For example, you might state, please respond to this invitation within 48 hours. Also, set a cancellation policy by stating, if you need to cancel, please call or email me as soon as possible. You could also include a statement that says, upon acceptance of this invitation, you are expected to attend. Finally, you could also include a statement like this. This meeting is a planning session, and your participation and idea sharing will be greatly appreciated. Structuring your invitation with clear and concise information and expectations sends the message that you are seriously managing this meeting. You do not want to be famous for holding boring and inefficient meetings. This is something that takes a long time to correct. In this next section, we'll talk about the meeting space, how to set it up, what makes the most sense, what will support an effective and efficient meeting. While this may seem like a trivial step, without setting up your meeting space properly, you may in effect be sabotaging your ability to have a successful meeting. There are several areas to consider when planning the logistics of your meeting. Physical space. Consider the space in which you plan to hold your meeting. Is it on-site or off-site? Is it virtual? Do you need to make reservations? Does it need to be set up? Do you have to contact your facilities department to remove or add partitions? Do you need furniture to be moved? Travel. Identify who will need to travel in order to attend your meeting. Do they need transportation to and from the meeting location? Do you have to make security aware of their presence so they're not held up at the door? Food. Determine if you need to organize meals. Is your meeting starting early in the morning? Should you serve a light breakfast? Is your meeting all day? Will your meeting be catered? Are you planning to have lunch at a local restaurant? Do you need to make reservations? Audio and visual. Later, we'll discuss electronic options. However, if you plan to use electronics like a presentation or video, consider the following. Do you have to get this placed in your meeting room? Are you savvy enough in troubleshooting technical problems, or do you need a technical assistant? Do you need a projector, a screen, a computer, other devices? Do you need a sound system set up so everyone can hear the presenters? And finally, signage. Do you need to get signs, posters, or special handouts made prior to your meeting? Having a predefined list for setting up your meeting is a useful tool, and we're going to discuss the setup of your meeting using a worksheet over the next few lessons in our webinar. In the first section, you will see a simple list of items comprising the basic essentials in setting up the meeting space. The list consists of the following items: a sufficient number of tables and chairs, power strips for laptops and other electronic devices, audio-visual setup, a whiteboard with markers and eraser, a lectern, water, verification that the room temperature is comfortable, a microphone for large meetings, a projector, a laptop, verification that the room is located in a quiet and private area. Make sure you get to the meeting place early enough, giving you time to set up the room without the participants seeing you do it. Getting caught setting up the room gives the impression that you are unprepared, which may affect your meeting environment. Extra touches makes your meeting more meaningful to your participants. The handout we discussed outlines some items you can incorporate in your meeting setup. Let's review some extra touches. Think about name tents already printed and set up on tables. A table with name tags for each participant already printed. A projector on with a welcome message illuminated on the screen when people walk in. Signage outside the meeting room professionally completed. Some kind of keepsake or logo item at each place setting. Music before the meeting starts and during breaks. a folder with all meeting materials inside, the agenda, handouts, etc. Candy or mints at the tables. Posters or visual aids posted around the meeting room. Professionally done definitely will look better. Video playing relevant materials on the screen before the meeting starts. A coat rack during winter months. When it comes to adding extra touches, be sure to gauge the audience and meeting purpose and plan accordingly. You do not want to create a celebratory experience when the meeting is about cutting costs, for instance. Otherwise, going the extra mile helps to make your meeting more effective by creating a personalized environment. The types of activities that are involved in your meeting could help you determine the physical setup. However, before you think further on this topic, let's review some basic setups. One is conference style seating. This is the basic long rectangular or oval shaped table. This type of setup is good for short meetings with less than 30 participants. You might use this for small training sessions and close interactions. U-shaped seating. This is a setup where the tables form a U shape. This is effective where face-to-face interaction is desired. This setup is also good for accommodating larger groups. T-shaped seating. This design sets up the tables in a T shape. This is also good for face-to-face and large group meetings. However, this shape allows for leaders to sit at the cross point of the T. Classroom style seating. This type of seating is best when learning is going to take place and the participants need to take notes. This style can be used for both large and small groups. Knowing the various styles of seating arrangements helps to determine which to use based on the activity. Here are some suggestions depending on what you want to accomplish. A planning meeting, use conference style seating. Some type of sales training, use a classroom style. Strategy sharing meeting, use the T-shaped style seating method. You're updating a project or providing a status report. Maybe a U-shaped style seating is best. The physical arrangement of the meeting room should always focus on providing a comfortable setup in which all participants are able to view the presenter, other participants, screens, flip charts, and whiteboards if they're being used. New technology has created many options that weren't available in the past for setting up meetings. In this section, we'll talk about some of those tools and techniques, and we'll also talk about the pitfalls of not using these new technologies effectively. The use of electronics in meetings bring a wealth of advantages if used properly. Technology has increased the reach of the meeting room into the virtual world. We are now capable of connecting with participants anywhere in the world. Technology also expands our ability to disseminate and record information. We're going to discuss an overview of some of the various tools you can employ in your next meeting. One is presentation software. So using programs like Microsoft PowerPoint can help you organize your materials into a single file. Once the information is in the presentation program, you can create handouts that you can give to your participants as an agenda. In many of these electronic portals, there are electronic whiteboards, and that's an efficient way to write and record ideas all with one source. The electronic device acts like a normal whiteboard, but uses special electronic markers. This electronic device can also be recorded based on the items that are written on the board for later reference. Web meeting programs. Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc. allow you to conduct your meeting via the internet. Voice, images from your desktop, and a webcam view of the meeting room and the individual make this virtual option very convenient. Video conferencing. This dedicated line uses cameras and television screens to connect 2 or more remote sites into one meeting, similar to web meeting programs that we mentioned just a moment ago. Telephone conferencing. This is a dedicated telephone line where many participants can call in and participate in the meeting. Now, there are many variations of the electronic tools that we'll discuss in this lesson that you can use. Maybe your company has already purchased these programs, or you can use a pay-as-you-go product from an online vendor. Choosing the type of electronic tool depends on the audience, distance, and technological capabilities of the meeting place. The most important thing to consider when dealing with electronic meeting tools is your ability to use and troubleshoot them. Many things could affect the performance of these tools. You must be comfortable enough with the technology to deal with the unexpected. In order to avoid embarrassing issues during your meeting, you should test all systems and make sure your IT department supports them. In fact, you should always run your technology plans by your IT team. They may need to do some back-end things to help support your video or web conferencing tool. Before you try using a new tool, get some training and practice. Understanding your electronic tool could take some reading as well as practice. Test the program with someone you know. Practice using the tool in a smaller, more personal meeting before you decide to do it in a larger session with outside guests. Avoid using technology just for the sake of using it. Make sure that the participants who will need to use the tools to participate are capable of using it themselves. The last thing you want is someone telling you in the middle of the meeting that they do not know how to launch the program. Here's a quick list of things to consider if you plan to use technology. Is the complexity of adding the technology outweighing the potential glitches? Are you capable enough to handle any issues that may arise during your meeting? Is your audience capable of handling the technology? Will you have adequate support from your IT department? Are there any costs that you have to consider? In any case, using technology requires knowledge. If you choose to use technology in your meetings, learn the system and practice, practice, practice. Finally, don't get too carried away with technology. It becomes obvious when technology is simply being used to dazzle the audience. This can be distracting and it can reduce the effectiveness of your meeting. An assessment allows you to determine quickly if you need to use technology or not. When making a decision, determine the following. Are you proficient with the technology? Are you able to ask someone who is proficient to assist you with the technology? Will there be people connecting to my meeting from remote locations? Is there a large number of graphics that will be presented? Are the participants capable of using the technology? Does the meeting room support the technology that will be used? Do you have IT support available to you? Do you have the budget to support the technology? If you answer no to any of these questions, determine the risk of going ahead with the technology. If it's too risky, avoid using it unless you absolutely have to, as in the case of remote conferencing. Just make sure you get the training you need well in advance or have someone available who is technically competent to support you. In this next section of our webinar, we'll talk about roles and responsibilities. In order to make your meeting effective, efficient, successful, we need to make sure everybody in that meeting, including participants, understand their roles and responsibilities, why they are there, and what's needed to make the outcome of this meeting successful. The meeting chairperson is responsible for directing the proceedings of the meeting. They are time managers, referees, and enforcers of the rules if they are broken. The chairperson does not necessarily have to be you all of the time, but when you do defer the chairperson's duty to someone else, make sure you are confident that the person you choose can handle the role. The chairperson must be able to lead the meeting and be firm throughout. Let's talk about some additional responsibilities of the chairperson. Being aware of the rules of the meeting. Focusing on the aim or objective of the meeting. Remaining fair with all participants. Getting the meeting started. Transitioning from one agenda topic to the next. Introducing the next presenter. Handling disruptions. There's some qualities to consider for any chairperson. They should have some level of authority. They should be flexible. They should be impartial. They should display maturity. The role of the chairperson is essential if the meeting is to have some form of control. If you are the chairperson, make sure you do not take on additional roles. You want to remain focused on the task associated with the role of the chairperson. If you select another person to be that chairperson, it is good practice to meet with them in advance to coordinate the agenda and set expectations. You want to avoid miscommunication during the meeting, which could hurt the credibility of both your chairperson and yourself. Taking minutes requires some basic skills. For instance, a good minute taker will possess great listening skills and attention to detail. They will have excellent writing and communication skills. The person you select must be able to maintain focus and not get carried away with the meeting, which could cause them to miss crucial information. It's best to select someone who is not directly involved in the meeting, allowing them to not have to participate. Here's a good list of tasks that a minute taker should handle. Before the meeting, determine the tool that's going to be used for recording the minutes. A laptop, pencil and paper, some other type of recording instrument, etc. Become familiar with the names of the attendees and who they are. Obtain the agenda and become familiar with the topics. During the meeting, take attendance. Note the time the meeting begins. Write the main ideas presented in the meeting and the contributor of that information. Write down decisions made and who supported or opposed the decision. Note follow-up items. Take note of items to be discussed in the next meeting. Note the end time of the meeting. After the meeting, type up the minutes immediately. Proofread the minutes and correct any errors in grammar and spelling. Save or send the document to the meeting owner. Using a template helps to keep the minute taking consistent. Remember to meet with the person you choose to be your minute taker before the meeting in order to go over the template or any other issues that need to be discussed. The attendees are not excluded from assuming a role or having a responsibility in the meeting setting. Of course, you can't force the responsibility on your attendees, but you can attempt to influence them. The attendees are the biggest success factor of your meeting. If they feel that they accomplished something in the meeting, they will applaud you. However, if they walk away feeling they wasted their time, this could affect your credibility. The following are some responsibilities your attendees could assume. Preparation. Being prepared to contribute to the meeting. Being prepared to arrive early and avoid being late. Being prepared for the meeting by jotting down ideas and questions ahead of the meeting. Being prepared by reading the agenda prior to the meeting. Being prepared for a long meeting by getting enough rest the night before. They can also participate, asking questions, taking notes, sharing ideas. And finally, they can be productive. They can avoid carrying side conversations. They can remove distractions like cell phones and other PDAs. They can also keep to the allotted time if it is on the agenda. Large meetings present very different dynamics as compared to smaller meetings. Managing a larger meeting requires more resources and assigned roles. If you're chairing the meeting yourself, you need to rely on others to ensure all things are well executed. Here are some additional roles you may want to consider if you're managing a large meeting. An extra minutes taker for more accuracy. An individual to distribute all materials related to the meeting. A person to greet attendees. A person to run the audio and visual equipment. A person to manage the hospitality aspect of your meeting. A co-chair. A person managing the presentations. On the other hand, in small meetings, you can certainly assume multiple roles. For example, you could be the chairperson, technical person, and the minute taker. Small meetings are certainly less formal, and you can leverage the informal environment to multitask. In any situation, careful planning and assessing the risk of working with fewer roles will help you determine what roles need to be filled. When in doubt, get more help. You certainly want to get off on the right foot by opening your meeting effectively, and that requires both a technique and a flow. The signals flow gives you an easy model to follow when opening the meeting. Here's a breakdown of the acronym. Salutation. When you open the meeting, welcome and greet your participants. Introduction is where you introduce who you are. Guest mentioned is where you introduce those attendees that are special guests. Need to know is a list of things like logistics, bathroom location, fire exits, general meeting format, and how you would share that with attendees. Agenda is where you discuss the purpose of the meeting and give a brief overview of the agenda. Laws of the meeting is where you discuss how the meeting is going to run. This includes policies on electronic devices, participation, and handling conflict. Segue is the part of your introduction that links this part to the next topic, which in this case will be the role of the agenda. Practicing your opening is the best way to become better at it. Over time, you can develop your own style. We've mentioned the agenda on multiple occasions, of course, because it's so important. We need to also make sure we understand very specifically what the role of the agenda is. The agenda is an entity that plays a vital role similar to that of the chairperson or the minute taker. If it's not adhered to, your meeting will experience time and participant management problems. In many cases, meetings run over or are cut short, leaving important topics unaddressed. Consistently missing the agenda time and topics is a sign of poor meeting management. Let's talk about a list of items that can help you adhere to your agenda. Does your agenda communicate meeting topics, presenters, and the time allotted for each speaker? Does your agenda provide focus by stating the meeting objectives clearly, outlining the meeting in increments of time, providing a checklist of things to accomplish during the meeting, allowing the attendees to both see the beginning and the end of the meeting while keeping them from wondering when the meeting will end? Here's a sample of how to introduce the agenda as a role at the beginning of the meeting. The agenda will help us meet today's goal by deriving a good sales strategy. We have 4 presenters who are going to discuss how to present the new product, handle objections, gain commitment, and close the sale. The agenda will be our guide so we can stay on track and finish on time. Simply handing out the agenda does not communicate its role. You must introduce it like any other person that has a role in your meeting. Using a parking lot in your meetings provides a place where topics that cannot be answered during the meeting are noted for follow-up later. Sometimes the topics in the parking lot may be answered during the course of the meeting, but this is unusual. The parking lot is simple to implement. You could create a physical place by using a piece of flip chart paper with sticky notes. Perhaps you prefer electronic documentation. You can collect parking lot topics on a spreadsheet, but whatever you choose, you need to have a basic format. So, some things to consider. Take a few moments to share with the attendees how the parking lot will work. It's meant for topics that require follow-up after the meeting. They can hold questions that can be answered for later in the meeting. Then also provide brief instruction on how to register a parking lot issue. Provide the question or topic, the contributor's name and contact information on a sticky note or verbally to the minute taker. The chairperson will review parking lot topics to determine if the topic requires follow-up after the meeting. Follow-up communication will be sent to all members of the meeting. Remember, the parking lot is helpful in managing your time. It gives you the ability to move off of a topic that requires more research and time to develop. Remember to check the parking lot at the end of the meeting and always be sure to follow up when you say you will. Even when you've done a great job of preparing for your meeting, set it up properly, made sure roles and responsibilities are understood, there is still the possibility for disruptions. It's important that we understand how to deal with those disruptions when they arise. In this section of the webinar, we'll talk about dealing with disruptions. In order to keep your meeting on track, you should set clear expectations on how time management will be used in the meeting. Setting expectations up front avoids surprise and indignation from the presenter because they will not be caught off guard. In addition, as a chairperson, you must feel comfortable interrupting the presenter when necessary. Most times the presenter would appreciate a warning that their time is almost up. This way, they do not have to worry about time. The stop technique helps you to keep your meeting on track by doing the following. Setting expectations. Letting your presenters and attendees know you intend to manage the agenda firmly removes the element of surprise. When you neglect to set time management expectations, you are subject to an array of reactions from the presenter and attendees. It may be taken as rude behavior, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let the presenter know that you will give them a signal at 5 and 2 minutes remaining. In addition, set expectations for questions and answers. Telling attendees to write their questions down to be asked at the end of the presentation avoids unnecessary interruptions that could potentially sidetrack the conversation. Time the presenter. Using a timer is the best way to manage the time of your meeting. Keep to the allotted time for both the presentation and the question and answer activity. Always provide a warning time so the presenter does not have to stop abruptly. Overcome fear of interrupting. Perhaps you do not have a problem with this, but there are many who see interrupting someone as rude and find it difficult to do. The best way to overcome this is by setting those expectations up front. This way you know the presenter is expecting an interruption. The same holds true for questions being asked. If left unchecked, you could lose a lot of time by allowing excessive questions. Use your parking lot for questions that require more thought in answering. Call time on question and answers so you can move to the next topic. And finally, politely warn people that time is nearing. Avoid being harsh and rigid. Treating others with respect is the best way to keep the meeting moving with plenty of participation. You don't want them to shut down because you are or they think you are becoming a tyrant. Going into overtime presents several problems. Once the meeting extends beyond its original end time, you will begin to lose the attendees' attention. This is particularly obvious in large meetings. No matter what size the meeting you're dealing with, though, the goal to dealing with overtime is to acknowledge it before it happens. Look at the agenda and determine if you need to go over. If you do, then here are some suggestions that might mitigate the effects of going into overtime. Determine your constraints. Is the room or venue available for overtime? Do attendees have to travel? Will they be able to stay? Warn attendees in advance that the meeting will run over time. Determine how much more time will be needed, and then communicate the extra time to the attendees. In a small meeting, try to gain consensus to go into overtime. So think about providing choices. In a large meeting, provide a brief break at the normal end time so those who have to leave will do so during the break and not during the meeting. In a small meeting, allow those who need to leave to do so. If overtime is not an option, determine what agenda items will be missed and plan an alternative way of getting the information to the attendees. Make sure you follow up with an email and then think about the topic or topics that need to be saved for the next meeting. As we mentioned earlier, it can be difficult to hold participants accountable. Participation, questioning, preparedness can easily be overlooked. Holding your participants accountable involves communication. Here are 3 basic steps you can take that will help you to hold your participants accountable during your meetings. 1, set your expectations in advance, and maybe even in your invitation. Outline what you expect from participants in your meeting. You may need them to bring questions or help by providing information. You may want them to participate with vigor. In any case, you must outline what you expect of them before you can hold them to a standard or expectation. 2, clarify the consequences. Let the participants know how you plan to hold them accountable. Perhaps you can warn them that you will be calling on everyone for answers. You may also want to reference their superiors' expectations as motivation. And finally, follow through. If you said you would do something, then you must do it. Do not get in the habit of making empty threats. People will respect you and will naturally be accountable to you because of your work ethic. Most participants do not want to be on the bad side, so to speak. They want to contribute. With practice, your ability to assert yourself and communicate with clarity your expectations, consequences, and determination will make this process much easier. With practice, your ability to assert yourself and communicate with clarity your expectations, consequences, and determination will make this process easier. Constant disruptions caused by attendees running in and out of your meeting will affect the experience of other attendees. We often take it for granted that attendees will stay in the meeting and not leave. Therefore, we don't necessarily discuss this issue often at the beginning of the meeting. Addressing this form of distraction is best done proactively. We can use the sit method to help set the expectation regarding running in and out of the meeting. Next, incorporating frequent breaks lessens the chances of participants leaving the room. And finally, giving timely feedback to those who break the rule is necessary in order to stop frequent violators. So let's review these 3 steps in detail. First, set expectations. Tell participants at the beginning of the meeting what you expect of them when it comes to staying in the meeting room. Explain to them the effects of constantly running in and out of the meeting and how it will impact the presenter and other participants. Let all participants know that if they need to leave the room, to do so only if it is an emergency. If it is an emergency, they should leave the meeting because they will be more of a distraction if they stay. Next, incorporate frequent breaks. At the beginning of your meeting, tell the participants they will get a 5-minute break every hour the meeting lasts, for instance. Establishing this up front lets the participants know when to expect the next break. Finally, provide timely feedback to those who break the rules. When a participant continues to run in and out of your meeting, it is best to address that with them as soon as possible. If you have a problem participant, quietly leave the room and wait for them outside. Speak with the participant in a respectful manner and let them know that their behavior is disrupting the meeting. Ask if they are experiencing an emergency and ask them if they need to leave. If there's no emergency, ask the participant to please wait until the next scheduled break to do whatever it is that they have to do. Cell phones are typically a source of distraction in many meetings. While most people know to place their phones on silent when they are entering a meeting, they may forget. Your job as the meeting manager is to remind them. Here are a couple of steps you can take to remind your participants to turn off those phones. Place signs in the room instructing participants to silence their cell phone. They can be humorous and lighthearted. In any case, you will get the message across. Make an announcement at the beginning of the meeting instructing participants to turn off their cell phone now. The signs are a backup in case you forget to do this. Since the participants will most likely be looking at the agenda, place a reminder there too. This way you have several areas where the participants can get the message. One cell phone ringing in the middle of the meeting could lead to a disruption that could take a couple minutes to recover from. You can reduce this type of distraction by almost 100% by just mentioning it at the beginning of the meeting and providing reminder signs. Have you ever participated in a meeting that seemed to go off on a tangent? This may be the most difficult piece of meeting management. Your biggest challenge is to redirect without offending participants. We can use the ear technique to help you do this in 3 simple steps. First, engage in the conversation by becoming a contributor for a moment. Your goal is not to carry the conversation, but to gain back some control by taking over the meeting floor. Once engaged, you can go on to the next step. Acknowledge that the topic is valid and worthy of discussion. This should be a short and affirming statement. This avoids embarrassment to anyone who carried the conversation when it is time to redirect. Finally, you're redirecting back to the conversation or the topic of your meeting. This brief statement ends the last discussion and starts up the previous one that was on topic. Let me give you a sample of an ear script. The participant who's on a tangent. I think pizza for breakfast is best. There's no doubt about it. Meeting manager. I'm willing to try pizza for breakfast. It can't be that bad. Perhaps you represent a large number of pizza lovers that enjoy the same thing you do. I'm certainly not going to knock it until I try it. Now let's get back to the problem of employee morale in the call center. Who has some ideas they can share? Now granted, the topic was embellished, but this script demonstrates the steps clearly. Using the ear method can help you master the meeting room every time the conversation goes astray. Sometimes a meeting can result in conflicts. This may be true of meetings where new teams are storming together and forming. Conflict could arise between 2 participants with opposing views. In any case, conflict in a meeting has to be managed. There's an acceptable degree of tension, which is normal in debates. However, when the tension turns into an outright conflict, the focus turns from the meeting to the spectacle that is the conflict. Your job as a meeting manager is to diffuse the conflict and restore order to the meeting. Allowing conflict to go unchecked could fester into a larger problem for everyone in the meeting. The news of the conflict will spread quickly, and how you managed it will be scrutinized. Here are 3 steps to take when conflict arises. First, stop the conflict by intervening and making a statement that acknowledges the conflict. Don't become frustrated. Don't take sides and don't yell. Be professional and calm. Simply state that the discussion has turned personal and it needs to stop. Second, instruct the parties to drop the discussion for now and attempt to regain their composure. There's no need to carry on if the discussion is counterproductive. Third, roll into a break, even if you just got back from one, it might make sense to take a break and send the participants away for a moment. Call on the parties in conflict and hold a brief expectations meeting. You are not there to resolve their conflict, but you must manage their conflict because it is your meeting. Tell the persons in conflict that they must immediately stop the behavior, restate the need for the meeting, and that healthy debate is always welcome. Ask them to agree to behave for the remainder of the meeting. The meeting room is no place to resolve the deeper issues of any conflict. On the other hand, if the participants are all a part of a team that will meet regularly, then this issue has to be addressed in a coaching session or a separate meeting, and certainly not in front of spectators, so to speak. So let's talk about some of the most important aspects of making meetings most effective, and a couple of additional features that you might want to consider. The reason meetings typically last an hour is that our computer program that sets up the meeting usually has 30-minute increments of time. We are forced to schedule meetings to last at least an hour. On a daily basis, we attend more one-hour meetings than any other kind. When you have several meetings in a row that last an hour each, you will find that you do not have enough time to check your emails or do other things in between because the next meeting starts right on the hour. The 50-minute meeting is an effective way to space out meetings, allowing us time to do things in between. Conducting 50-minute meetings takes discipline and time management, though. Here's some steps you can take to make the most of your 50-minute meeting. Have an agenda. We discussed the importance of an agenda and the fact that this is a document that outlines what will be discussed in a specified amount of time. With an agenda, you will have the group agree on topics for discussion. Send out your agenda ahead of time so your participants get an idea of the allotted time for each topic. Set expectations with your participants that side conversations are not allowed and you expect them to be fully engaged in the meeting. iPhones, etc. are not allowed. Explain that you will hold them accountable. At the end of the meeting, summarize any action steps that resulted from the meeting. If you have none, you may want to reconsider the purpose of the meeting in the first place. Finally, send out summary notes. These are your meeting minutes, and this should be done as soon as possible after the meeting. Sending out the meeting notes is a great way to solidify those action items with the people who are responsible for doing them. Meetings can invariably feel boring, uninteresting, and even repetitive. In this section of the webinar, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks you can use to make your meeting more interesting. Games, magic tricks, jokes, when appropriate, can help support meetings that are more enjoyable, more engaging, and more interesting. Using games in meetings can help increase productivity. Many games could be used in meetings. We recommend you do some research and find a resource that outlines appropriate games that you can use. Remember to think about the meeting purpose before you use a game. If the meeting is about budget cuts, then you probably don't want to use a game in that meeting. Meetings that form new teams or launch a new product are typically best suited for games of some sort. Furthermore, determine how much time it will take to complete versus the entire time you'll be in the meeting. You don't want to play a 15-minute game in a 50-minute meeting. So here's some do's and don'ts when it comes to using games at meetings. Do use games from a book or legitimate resource. Do use games for meetings that are meant to form new teams. Always gauge the amount of time the game takes to play as compared to the entire meeting time. And practice the game before you use it. Some don'ts. Don't use games in serious meetings. Do not spend too much time on the game. And be careful about making a game up on your own unless you are extremely confident that you can pull it off. Prizes in meetings should be used to reinforce positive behaviors. The prizes certainly don't have to be extravagant. They could simply be pins, desk decorations, t-shirts, etc. When giving prizes away, be clear on how to win the prizes. Unclear instructions can lead to conflict if someone feels cheated. For example, if you announce that a person will get a prize for coming back from break on time, about 95% of the time you will have some participants simply stay in the room and not go to a break in order to win the prize. Make it clear they have to leave the room. Perhaps you can up the challenge by stating that the person coming back to the meeting who is closest to the break in time without going over will win. Here are some other ideas for distributing prizes in your meetings. The most participation, the first to arrive at the meeting, volunteering for something in the meeting, having the most creative solution, asking who can recap the action items best. There are certainly no limits on how to use prizes in your meetings, but make sure they are clear and make sure they support whatever efforts you're trying to encourage based on the type of meeting you're having. Simple magic tricks can reduce stress and create a fun meeting environment. Before you start doing magic tricks in meetings, you'll need to practice them at home. Magic tricks work well only when they're done right and with confidence. The setting up of the magic trick is the most important aspect. Don't be eager to do the trick or to make an announcement. Be calm and natural. Incorporate it into the meeting seamlessly. You don't want to stop and announce that you're going to do a trick, for instance. When participants are taken in by the trick without knowing, the effects are much greater. Research books and the internet for magic tricks that you can use. Practice the tricks and use them in the appropriate meeting setting. Try to avoid tricks that could embarrass someone. You want to create an environment that is safe, and offending someone can certainly hurt that environment. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar, and I hope it will help you more effectively manage and run your meetings, thus making your organization more productive. I guarantee if you use the tips and information we provided in this webinar, your meetings will be more effective, they will be shorter, and you'll need fewer meetings. Good luck on your journey to a more productive organization, and remember, I see you.